Welcome to the Create What You Speak podcast. Join me as we have a real-life discussion on how to change your life by changing your thoughts. Remember, question everything, trust yourself, and find your truth. Welcome to the Create What You Speak podcast. My name is Sloan Fremont, and I'm your host. This week, we're going to be talking about becoming and unfolding on your spiritual path. I'm really excited this week. My guest is John Sadiq. And, I was thinking before the show how to introduce you. And we on the show, we talk about what we experience as humans, what we go through, the questions that we ask the universe. And we're all on this journey. It often doesn't feel like that maybe, but we're on a journey. And I myself have wanted to fight the journey or resist the journey or be mad at the journey, right? And the goal with this show, the 4 or 5 years I've been doing this now, is to continue to explore that, be authentic about that, be real about that, and share my story with people. And John, I was so excited to have you this week. Your book is called Signpost of the Spiritual Journey, a practical roadmap to a meaningful life. And I have to say, after reading your book, I felt like I was talking with a friend. Like I felt like I knew you. I felt like I was, we were sitting in the room having a conversation, and I loved that. So I want to welcome you to the show. It's great to have you here.
Oh, bless you, Sloan. Thank you for having me on, and thank you everybody who's tuned in to listen. It's really kind of you to spend this time with us.
Yeah, it's so let me do just a quick introduction and then we'll get to it because there's a lot to talk about. So John Sadiq is a teacher, writer, and poet who has published 7 previous books. He runs retreats and classes with students around the world, and his self-acceptance through authenticity course has 20,000 registered students. He offers meditations via the Insight Timer app and live classes via the Wellness Coach app. John has had awakenings throughout his life from the age of 6, as well as a full near-death experience that led him to wish to share these teachings with anyone who would benefit from them. John, welcome to the show.
Bless you.
So let's start out with an icebreaker, just something fun. I like to do this at the beginning just to get to know my guests. So my question for you is, say you have to sing karaoke. What song?
Oh my. Right. First thing comes into my head. It's got to maybe I Love Rock and Roll, John Jett and the Blackhearts.
Yeah.
That'd be great. What was the last time I sang karaoke? What did I really, you know what? I really like Jolene.
Oh, Dolly Parton. Yeah, that's a good one.
Have you heard there's a video on YouTube of somebody who plays the 45 of Jolene slowed down to 33? Have you seen that?
No, haven't seen it.
You've got to check that out. It's unbelievable. It's like another song. It kind of becomes a male voice. It's still perfectly in tune. And you just wish that somebody would record it like that. It's got so much pathos in it. Incredible. Yeah. So if we're going out for karaoke, Jolene and I Love Rock and Roll.
Those are excellent choices. I was thinking about it for myself because I always, not that I sing karaoke that often, but I always try to get crowd pleasers so the crowd gets involved too. So it's just not me singing. And
so what's your choice? What are you choosing?
Well, so I would say Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper, or What's Up by 4 Non-Blondes. Even though I can't get the high notes, like that's always a crowd pleaser and a fun one. So those would be my 2.
Yeah. God, you got me thinking now. There's so many things,
I know.
Isn't there? There's things I'd want to sing, but no one would be like interested. But yeah.
Yeah, fun. Okay. All right. So let's talk about your new book, Signpost of the Spiritual Journey. So let's start out also by definitions. What do you define as a spiritual journey, and what are signposts that might be found along that way?
Gosh, that's the whole premise, really. What I would have defined as a spiritual journey has probably changed a lot as I've kind of continued on my own path. Mm-hmm. And I used to think that it was the seeking of something. And probably I lived my life seeking, looking. But in all honesty, I was trying to be a better person because somehow I'd learned that you're supposed to be better than you are, or trying to find love through becoming something. I always say that most people are either running away from something or running towards something, but actually those are exactly the same thing. Because if you're running towards something, you are running away from something.
Right.
But what I would say now is that the spiritual journey is the path of your own life. It can't be anybody else's. If you want to I use the G word, but I mean it in the big sense. God or life or whatever you want to call it has brought you here to be you in this time. So trying to be somebody else ain't the thing. But that doesn't mean egoic you. It means the life that is producing you in this very moment. And we all can feel that. So if you decide to allow yourself to actually experience that life within yourself, that begins to clean everything up. And that's what this book's about. It's about engaging with that true sense of life within yourself and how to begin feeling that if you don't really know how to do that. Or what might be standing in your way, like, generational and conditional kind of programming, societal programming, the things that try to turn you into somebody that isn't actually that seed of you. But if you think about it, Sloan, when you were little, you felt like yourself, didn't you? When you were 5, you felt like yourself. And when you're half the age you are now, something in you felt like yourself. And probably somewhere along the way, we think we've lost that. But there are moments where you feel it again. So we all know what that is. So there it is, that the thread is already within us. So signposts is the signposts that lead you back to that thread in yourself, and then cleaning up the other stuff, because you may as well clean that stuff up.
When you talk about seeking, I would say my awakening, really when I started the podcast about 5 years ago now, and I was running the same from something, but towards something. I was running from the pain and I wanted to go towards less suffering. Right.
Yeah.
And that seeking that you're talking about, I've talked about it on the show a lot, and I've talked with friends, I've talked with therapists. It seemed for me to be a theme in my life, like almost like I had this antenna up, right? Like I'm seeking. And then over the past several years, I finally realized that, I'm not looking outside of me. What I'm looking for is to become friends with me. I'm looking to be in my body and be with myself and not have all of this, pain pile on, right? Pain through thoughts that are looping in my head, or pain through regrets, or, whatever that might be. Yeah. And as I read your book and I went through it, I recognized a lot of things that I went through, very messily along the way, right? I don't know what I'm doing, right? I have no idea. I just know that I'm trying something different because I'm at that point where I can't stand the pain anymore. I have to have something different. And so when we start to go through this process, what are some of the things that you experienced when you got started? I'm sure there were, there was a moment maybe, or there's questions that come up. What was your experience like?
Well, it's such, our lives are so complex that we could literally this could be the entire show and 3 or 4 more. I had a strong sense of whatever that thing is, life. I just used to call it life from, as you said, from the age of 6. But I grew up in a very, very painful and difficult family. A lot of violence, and then outside the door, a lot of racism and, Nazi skinheads and things. And so it wasn't safe inside the house, and we spent time in care. My mum was very poorly. That's all I'll say about that. My mum was very poorly. And then outside the house wasn't safe too. So, I was kind of really forced to be my own resource a lot of the time. And yet that stuff kind of bound into me. And so things that I was kind of unaware of that were operating on me, but then subsequently I healed with some of the stuff that I talk about in the book, some of the methods. So I wanted the book to be really practical so people could actually do the work if they want to meet it. Right. That sounds like it's hard work, but actually I want to present it in a different way, that love is actually the way to approach the work rather than it being a grim, hard task. That taking that responsibility for oneself, that even the things that you've not been responsible for, which I think I say in the book, you know you're on the path when you start taking responsibility for what you're not responsible for in your own life, the things that have been placed into you. You think, why the hell should I have to do this? And you can moan all day and want other people to perfect themselves, or you can take responsibility. So when I started to take responsibility, I realized that I suffered with a terrible, terrible attachment disorder, codependency to almost kind of, insanely addicted levels, and so on and so on. And of course, all the projections and difficult karma that comes with acting out through those things, and thinking that just one more relationship or just finding the right person was going to solve my problems.
That seeking.
Yeah, the seeking, which feels completely natural. And we're taught by Hollywood movies and our pop records and everything that kind of intensity, that kind of longing is a kind of has meaning, we're lied to so constantly as to what love is that most of us don't really know what love is at all. We do, but we mistake this other thing for it. So the surprises along the way really were that love wasn't anything that I thought that it was like at all, that it was so much more simple and intimate. And the biggest surprise was is that when you turn with a true heart toward yourself and say, okay, I take responsibility now, it's easier and quicker to clean up these things than you could ever have imagined.
Right.
Right, I'm not saying it's easy, but anything is easier than the other thing. I always say it sounds hard, but the other thing is harder.
Right.
The other thing being continuing like this for the rest of your life.
Right.
Imagine.
You talk through the book, and on that, feeling like it's harder. You mentioned several times through the book, I'm offering information, right? It's not this, you're not telling anybody what to do. You're not forcing anybody to do anything, which is, I really loved that approach because it, like I said, when I felt like I knew you after reading the book, right? That
it's me. That's the funny thing about this book is that this is actually, that's my voice in there very clearly. You are sitting with me in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a completely separate person. We don't actually know each other. Right. And I know that can cause a lot of problems for authors and teachers and things. But I thought, well, the only way I can communicate with somebody is to genuinely turn up, in the hope that my genuineness in this book will allow for you to kind of find to be you.
Right.
If I'm true, you can be true. You've got to walk you've got to walk it, haven't you?
Right. And when you talked also about, when we ask these questions and talking about taking responsibility for things that we're not responsible for, when we get in that victim mode or that blame mode, we're asking the wrong questions, whether we know we're asking them or not, right? We have these questions that run through our mind. Why do I have to deal with this? Or why am I, why this, why that? And those questions are not helpful. I lived many years of my life in those questions. And the same, as you talk about in the book, about when it finally comes to that point of, I'm going to face this and I'm not going to run from this anymore, which is what I went through this year was, I finally was ready to face some things. And like you were saying, it was, and once I'm on the other side of that and I realized I could then grow and move to a whole nother level, I sat back and like you were saying, it was harder. The resistance and the energy and the emotion it took to fight off what I didn't want to face was so much harder than just facing the thing that I was not wanting to face. And there was this release after that, right? This relaxation, this openness that I was like, I didn't understand I could live that way. And that was fascinating to me when I went through that. That was fascinating.
I recognize what you're saying there. That's because the ego thinks it has to kind of somehow win some kind of war. Right. I call it being at war with yourself, this resistance. And so you war with yourself. But actually, something we talk about a great deal in the book is dropping to the heart. And so I mean, actually, there's one exercise, of physically just putting your hand on your heart because you don't know how to, And the minute you come to heart awareness, then then that door just swings open on its own. So the resistance really is this idea that somehow we've got to overcome something at the same level that it's being created at, which of course Einstein talks about, that you can never solve a problem at the same level that it's being created. You have to drop to a kind of a more knowing place, or a place of awareness. Well, the greatest place of awareness resides within the heart, not the sphere of the emotional heart, which can be just as reactive and conditioned as the mind, but the heart within the heart, the kind of the truer knowing within the self. But you begin where you can. And so very often it's just kind of, by inches and intuitions and so on. But the more you do it, then the easier it is to allow that shift to the heart every time. I would basically say that is the major movement that we need to make, but you see people actually committed to their projections and identities stemming from conditionality,
right,
to the point of death. Have you seen the film Dead Man Walking? You must have seen the film Dead Man Walking with Sean Penn.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It was a long time ago. I always recommend that to people who are kind of stuck with this stuff. And because, he's committed this horrendous rape murder. And Susan Sarandon, as a nun, is kind of going to see him on death row, trying to get him to open up. He's going to die. There's nothing you can do. And the entire film is him holding on to his persona, his projection, his conditionality of being a hard man, of beating the game somehow.
Right.
And in the last 20 minutes, he finally kind of drops it, and he's just with her. And he has more intimacy and life in that 20 minutes than he has in all the preceding years before. He hasn't lived one little moment.
Right.
And I don't want us to live like that. That was my reason for writing the book. I don't want people. I don't want us to live like that. You're free to, but but I would rather meet you, not this stuff,
Right.
But we're so addicted to this way of living.
And that can be hard to take, right? When we come to this realization of how we have been living and what these versions of ourselves that we create, these personas like you talk about, and the way we show up to the world, and what do I really want? Who am I really in all of this, right? And maybe, I know for me at the beginning, I didn't have the answers, and that was hard to take. And I think this past, 2 years or so has really shown a lot of us that it's always a choice, but at the point where I couldn't run from it anymore. I just couldn't run from it. Here it is.
No,
it's time to look at this. And as scary, as difficult as all of these emotions that came up, now that I'm further on the other side, it's never, again, it's a journey, right? I'm not saying I'm healed, I'm good, right? It's nothing like that. It's a journey. And I feel like once I got over that mountain, now I'm more accepting of I want the journey. So I was saying that when we start on the journey, once we get over that initial, almost a shock of the fact that things can be different, then what I found once I got past that, I was able to be more open and excited instead of fighting the journey. Because that's what it felt like for me most of my life. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, then you just welcome things. And it moves on even from that, really. At first, there's resistance and pain and difficulty, and then it's tiny little steps. But then as those little steps are made and there's healing in those areas, then more opens up, and then that ability kind of grows greater. So if you actively engage with that, it actually moves to a point where you're no longer even having to think about it. It just becomes naturally what you do. You see a problem coming, and instead of avoiding it or whatever, you just turn and face it and say, hey, let's not do it this way. We do. You realize we do that every single time. Let's not do that. Or you say that to yourself. God, look, there's that thing again. I see that kind of person. I begin reacting in that way. Let's not do that. And in fact, you even get beyond that. You get even beyond that. It doesn't even become a choice anymore. You just don't do it. Yeah. You're not that person anymore. Once you're not that person, you don't need to think about it anymore.
It's so interesting. And there's so many questions. My mind is going a 1,000 miles, so I feel like I'm kind of jumping all over. But there's a part in the book where you talk about letting go of things. Once you get on this path and you let go of things, and you talk about when you stopped drinking, you just stopped. It just wasn't you anymore. You walked across the street, gave the scotch to your neighbor, like, that's it, I'm done. And I felt along the path as well that I've had that, where especially recently, where, for me, it was concerts. I used to love to go watch concerts and follow musicians. You know, my house was covered in pretty much, living in Nashville, of course, I was easy, but, it got to and I still love music. I don't mean that I don't, but I realized over the past couple year, let's say, that that's not me anymore. I've grown into a different person. And what I also found with that was that I still had a lot of those reminders up, and those reminders were irritants to me of another life. They were irritating to look at. It was just these small little irritants. So I spent some time over the past 2 weeks clearing some of those out, not throwing them away, not getting rid, but just moving things and reflecting more of myself into the present day. And I found that, that's sometimes hard to do also, to let go of the past and become who you really are today. And that's one of the things, you know, on the journey that, I think was surprising for me.
Yeah, we talk about that very clearly. I talk about kind of getting rid of my records and things at a certain point along the way, and then wishing I hadn't done later, because you find that actually it's okay to enjoy things as well. But of course, you know, when we haven't got ourselves in the way that we're talking about, and it's more than a psychological journey, because we are talking about the psychological a lot of the time in this conversation, it seems, and yet that's not unimportant, because if you don't clean that side of things up, then it hampers the spiritual side as well. Or when that energy does begin to move, the more spiritual energy, then it will kind of still go through those lenses and kind of end up messed up. And we've seen many sort of teachers and spiritual people really kind of hurt other people in this way, and it goes on sort of time and time again. And I've addressed that as well, because it keeps happening so much. We have to talk about it. Right. We really have to look at what's going wrong with this stuff, and it's really rife at the moment.
Like what you hear so far? Take what you've learned and invest in yourself with the Create What You Speak Academy. Visit createwhatyouspeak.com to learn more. Now back to the show.
Before we come back to that sense in ourselves that is actually very easy to feel, that thread, as I call it, we live through things. So, you know, I like music, I like motorbikes, I like tattoos, I like this brand of beer. You know, in Britain, I'm not sure it happened. I'm sure it happens in a different way in the US. There was a time a couple of years ago where people mistook drinking gin for having a personality. You know, it was all about what kind of gin you drank, and they were like, "Oh, these gin bars opening," and well, I'm a Tanqueray drinker, darling, and you know, it doesn't matter how much gin or how much you know about gin, it doesn't replace you,
right?
You know, but some people will talk about football in this way. Some people will talk about basketball in this way. They know every NBA thing for 100 years or whatever, and not just their own team, but. And there's nothing wrong with that, but hell, you know, talk to me. Let me see you.
Yeah.
You know, can we just, you know, let's just have a cup of tea together. You know, you have your beer. I don't mind, but right. You know, can I just actually meet you?
And not the representative of you. My friend used to call that when she was dating, she would call it. Well, did they send the real them or did they send the representative? And the representative is that fake version, right? That's a surface version that's, and that's, you know, that's how a lot of us show up. I've shown up that way and throughout my life. And
if you think about the roots of that, you think about the roots of it, if you lean into it, if you're going to show up like that, that means you must think you're unworthy.
Yeah.
You must think, you know, it's a fearful, unworthy place. And yet it passes for standard, you know.
Right.
When did you last hear an authentic voice on the radio?
Yeah.
You know, instead of, hey there. You know,
I hope mine is authentic.
You're fantastic. No, you're fantastic. You're fantastic. I won't name the radio station I was on recently, something in the UK. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. They weren't there. You could tell that in between each question I'm answering, you can tell they're actually kind of not even listening and pointing at things and kind of, and then come back and they've got their set. Oh, it was awful. It was awful. But, you know, it's all right. They're still promoting my book.
Right, right. Well, but that's the kind of surface level stuff we're talking about. And that's what the book we're talking in the book you talk about moving past, right? Because it's not a way to, if you choose, again, and I'm assuming that people are making the choice, that's why they're listening to our conversation.
I don't think you have a choice. I think until you know, then you don't know. Even when you think you've got a choice, there's a lot of people around thinking they're all conscious, this, that, and the other, right. And they're just grifting. Quite honestly, they're at the end of the video, it's buy my T-shirt or something,
right,
or
right.
my new spiritual line of this, that, the other.
I will solve your problem and I will save you, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just conscious grifting. That's all it is. And there's tons of that around, and which and it's going to say, then I'm going to be like, well, buy John's book. I don't care, but it's nice if you do, Right. But you don't have to. We're not trying to sell you the book, If you tune in and you're listening to this, then it's great to be here with you. If you want to read the book, that's fantastic. If you don't, but I don't want to kind of twist your arm and say, it's going to make your teeth grow back or something, or give you a full head of hair. It didn't work for me, did it? Look at that.
For those listening and not watching the video, John doesn't have any hair.
Completely bald. Not even
let's talk a little bit about let's talk about resistance on this path, because I feel like most of my life was spent in resistance, and that was something that came. I thought that was how it had to be, was to be in resistance. And I love in the book how you talk about two terms. You mentioned vasana and samskaras. Yeah. And reading that paragraph about those two things really pulled some things together for me, because I understood, I don't even know, it was a feeling internally that I don't know if I can put into words, but it was another, like a piece. Like I always describe this, I talk about this all the time on the show when something clicks for me. It's like when you go to the eye doctor and they click the things in place and you can see clearly.
Yeah, and suddenly he's like, oh my God.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And that's how that paragraph was. So could you explain those two terms and what they mean?
Wow. Well, they're kind of often seen as being the same things, really. So samskaras tends to be thought of as tendencies, the tendencies that kind of we live through. And vasana, you've not heard, well, you may have heard the term, but more commonly you will have heard the term pain body, yeah. In more recent times. But when pain body is explained, it's always explained, it seems, in a very particular way. So the two things are very related. So samskaras tend to be almost like karmic tendencies. That's how we might think of them. Mm-hmm. And kind of awareness applied to those really kind of, you can start kind of see kind of what's going on, that we lean this way and we lean that way. But what vasana is the driving force behind those. And it's much less often spoken about. And it's way more subtle than calling something pain body. Because pain body sounds like pain that is moving in a particular way, in an outward sort of way. Mm-hmm. But what vasana is like a 10,000-year-old Sanskrit word. And that's why I like it. I love the lineages of things, because it shows you we've been working at this stuff for a long time. We're not alone. And there are amazing people, the rishis and the teachers of the past who have really tried to kind of look at this and ask these incredible questions of how do we actually live and grow to our full potential. And what vasana translates as is deeply worn groove. And that makes a lot more sense to me than pain body, because pain body sounds like reaction. Deeply worn groove, if you think about it like a valley, the valley's going to flood whether it rains on the valley or on the tops of the valley. So wherever the energy is poured in, it still goes to the same place. Mm-hmm. And so you'll see that within your life when you get that looping, repeating pattern of no matter what you do, it's still the same damn thing keeps happening. That's vasana. Yeah. Whether that's an outward thing of reaction towards another person, or it's inwardly turned and crushing and depressing of yourself, so that you do things like, always trying to be really, really good or overperforming at work or, everybody thinks you're gregarious, but you sit at home absolutely alone and depressed um, or that you are really reactive and violent things come out of you and you have no idea where they come from and you feel like a 5-year-old that's just had a temper tantrum every time you visit your parents at Christmas. And we all know that one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so it's usually thought of as that kind of reactive one that turns us into a stamping 5-year-old, but actually it's all that other stuff as well. So Vasana is actually easier to work with than you think it is. And the answer is the same all the way through, which is awareness.
Right.
And, we can't go into kind of all the content of the book because it's about developing that awareness. What the book aims to do is help the person work with themselves so that they move their awareness in a certain way so that it actually is able to see what's going on. And we can't do that when we're still in reactive mode, of course,
right.
And basing ourselves in love, of course. There's lots of practical things to kind of help you base yourself in love and kind of more present-based awareness and so on. And then once you have that, then what you'll find is when Vasana it's active constantly. That's what you don't realize. It's constantly active. But then when you bring your awareness to it, it's not going to suddenly disappear. But every time you meet the thing with awareness rather than the thing that you always do, that valley is filled in a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
But you also get to the point where you realize that some of this stuff is never going to go away. And so you just have to kind of make friends with it. It's just, oh, there's my old, once upon a time, it's like, that thing's going to destroy me. It's the worst thing in the world. And then, sort of 10 years down this healing line and line of spiritual development or whatever, it's like, oh, look, there's my old friend, that funny little sexual thing that I used to get, Come and have a cup of tea. How have you been doing recently? Well, all right, well, we don't need to go there now, do we? Or, there's that funny reaction I have to that kind of person. Nice to see you, old friend. Don't come again.
Right. And it's not that level of feeling out of control when it happens.
No.
Right? That we often experience. And you talk about when we have that action, missing out on the root or the source of where the thought form comes from. And that was that was one of those clarifying moments for me, because it's these things that are on autopilot. So it seems, right. And then you talk a lot through the book about awareness and presence. And when we do have the awareness and pay attention to these things, we're filling in that groove, right, in that valley, we start, because you talk also in the book about experiencing freedom, whatever freedom means, right, to the reader. And when we're able to have the awareness and not run, not resist, not fight it, it does, I felt, at least in my own life, it starts to give me it gives me my own freedom back from myself almost. It frees me from myself. And
the limited idea of self for what is true, for what's authentic in you. That right. is real freedom. The freedom that we bandy about so much of the time that we think we're gaining is so not what freedom is at all, because it's attachment through things. It's an attachment to one side of a duality always, whichever way you're going at it, be it political or otherwise. It's always, and it's and some kind of false equivalence or kind of false idea of kind of equality isn't solving it either, because then you just end up kind of dying in a kind of nowhere place. But we say clearly in the book over and over again that kind of moving beyond duality isn't about picking one side and killing the other side off.
Right.
It's actually a movement to wholeness, which is different from the two. In Zen, they say it's not two, but it's not one either.
Which is such and I again, that's one of those things I don't have. I can feel it in my body.
Yeah, you feel it, don't you? It's like it's right there, isn't it? It's in the cells. It's like, oh my God, that's it.
Yeah, it's that
Yeah.
coming home to that truth of who we are. And that, again, for me, it's often not something that I can express in words, not at this time, at least. Maybe as my journey progresses, I'll be able to. But that feeling, and that's the awareness. That's what we should, that's what paying attention to, those feelings that sometimes we want to dismiss or pretend aren't there or think we made them up or, whatever comes to whatever story.
You've really read this book, haven't you? I'm really impressed.
What?
You really read it, haven't you?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I don't just tell you that I read the book. Like I actually, and that's why I do I love doing this podcast of conversations, but also it's to help me grow too, right? Because my belief is every person that I interact with, every book that I get, there's a message for me in there. There's something for me to learn.
You're fantastic. You're just fantastic.
And yeah, I read it, and when I tell you I love the book, I mean that. I'm not just telling you.
This is awesome. You're really awesome. I'm really touched, actually. I'm really touched. The number of times that it's just like, well, you can tell. Again, you can tell kind of by the questions. It's like, oh
right.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
And,
I think having these conversations is, I say it all the time on here, is so important because there's a different, I don't want to use the word better because it implies something that I don't mean, but there is a different way to exist in the world. And that's what, I want to be able to show people.
Yeah. Authenticity. Authenticity is absolutely paramount. And, it's one of the, I would say that if anybody's kind of starting out on their path, and really it's not a choice, but you feel like it's there, you kind of make the choice to put your first foot forward, as it were. But if you don't know where you're going, always just feel into that heart of authenticity within yourself. Compare everything against that kind of North Star of authenticity in yourself, and you're never going to go wrong. Quite honestly. Right. I mean, you're going to be in the dark a lot of the time and flailing about and going, what the hell? But if you just kind of look for, okay, well, I don't really know where I'm going to go here and I don't know what's happening. But I've got this book in one hand and my heart says, it seems okay to go this way, even though I'm shaking and quaking and I think I might die, but there's something, that way feels fake, but this way feels real. You just keep choosing the real. That's that thread of you that we talked about.
Right.
That aligns with that. You're going to end up in the right place. And God love you for it, quite honestly, because that is the only way forward.
It is. And I think having the courage, you even say that in there about having the courage, and you say something, I can't remember exactly how your words were, but, not the war hero. It's something, you said something to that effect, that it's the person doing the work. That's the real hero in this, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate everybody and the efforts that they make. And I'm not putting anybody who's fought in a war down in any way.
Right.
But our standardized meme of hero is the vet, but we don't, and we give them medals. But I think anybody who actually turns and faces themselves with this kind of truth, and the courage that takes, we don't have medals for that. But if I had a medal, I would give it to you, for doing that to anybody, because it is the hardest thing. People think heroism is kind of fighting in a war and kind of, surviving or killing the bad guy or winning or something like that. But I personally have known, and I know other people have known, just how hard it is to kind of get up some days, put your clothes on, wash your face, and turn up to work.
Yeah.
Get the kids to school, and make it through that day. And there's heroism at levels that the world doesn't want to acknowledge, and yet the real heroism can be often that. And so. This path is not for just somebody who sits and meditates and looks all shiny. It's for anyone. And that's what, it's not your education, your financial background, what country you're from, what your religion is. None of that stands in the way of the path of your own life. The situations are going to be radically different and radically, varying. But the fact that you're here as a human being means this path is at your feet right now.
Right.
Whoever you are.
It is. And John, I could talk to you for hours about this because, as you can tell, I just love talking about this. And I think it's just so important to bring these kinds of.
There's nothing else to talk about, not problematizing things, because I used to problematize everything. Everything was like, let's look at it, let's turn it into a problem and turn it inside out. But actually, talking about what's real and authentic, it never gets tiring.
Right.
Quite honestly.
I agree.
Yeah.
Great. My guest this week has been John Siddique, and we've been talking about becoming and unfolding on your spiritual path. And so, John, as we close out the show, is there one piece of advice you'd like to leave the listeners with to help them get started on their own spiritual awakening?
I think I've just said it, which is kind of, whoever you are, the path is yours already. It's your own sweet life,
Yeah, you own your life.
You own your life, and your life owns you. Your life owns you, I think. And so get to know your life, not the kind of hollow parts, but know them too, meet them with love, meet everything with love, but get to know your own life. And, the path isn't tomorrow or yesterday or healing somebody else. And it's not a kind of narcissistic idea of ourselves. It's you standing on this earth in your life. Because that's what the universe wanted you for, or God, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
You were put here to be fully you and to have real freedom, not some secondhand kind of somebody else trading on you kind of freedom.
Right. For sure. 100% there. I totally agree. John, thank you so much for being on the show. Can you tell the listeners how they can find out more about you and your book?
Yeah. My website is authenticliving.life, and which is great. I'm not .com, I'm .life. I can't believe we found that one. So authenticliving.life. And that's kind of like the hub for everything, really. You'll find everything else from there.
Okay.
Instagram, I'm just the @ John Siddique, JOHNSIDDIQUE. There's Twitter and there's YouTube and all that. But as I say, go to Authentic Living. And it kind of goes from there, really.
Okay, great. Again, John, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. We could talk for hours.
We really could. If you'll have me back sometime, I'll come back and we'll chat some more.
I would absolutely
you're great. And I might be recommending one or two other people to Hey, Sloane's great,
Okay, sure, yes.
Okay, I'd be like,
I would love that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, I know some wickedly wonderful people, so I need to introduce to my friend Danny. Anyway, we'll keep that for another day. We'll talk.
Okay. What an absolutely amazing conversation with John Siddique. I love talking about becoming and unfolding on your spiritual path. I think we touched on so many things in this conversation, and I was, my favorite thing that we talked about in this whole conversation, there were many, but when we talked about resistance and we talked about vasana and samskaras, and vasana being described as a deeply worn groove into which everything flows. I don't know if it's just where I'm at or what I'm going through right now, but that resonated so much with me. And to be able to think about developing the awareness to notice when those things come up again, like John said, that I'm getting the same damn thing again, right? And being able to wake up to that awareness and instead of reacting to it, meet it where it is, become almost friends with it, or become like, having that awareness, it stops that groove from continuing to get deeper, and it starts to fill that valley up because we're doing something different. We're choosing to respond to the situation differently, or choosing to internally process things differently, right? And so having that understanding and being able to meet our things, I'll just summarize them as things, as an old friend and with a attitude of awareness is so life-changing. It's such a different way to show up. And I just loved it. Like I said, I loved the book. I felt like I was talking with John directly. I'd never talked with him before today. But being able to read the book and have this conversation, it was just amazing. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So hopefully I'll be able to get John back on again in 2022. All right. So that's it this week for our topic of becoming and unfolding on your spiritual path. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope you found something in there that helps you on your spiritual journey, wherever you are right now. So that's it for this week. Let's see, a couple of things. Remember, if you haven't signed up to get notified when I have a new podcast episode, visit sloanfremont.com. You can sign up on the right-hand side. If we're not connected on social media, please go to the links in the show notes. You'll be able to connect with me there. My Telegram channel is growing. We've got a lot of great interaction going on there. So please join us in the Telegram channel. You can find that in the show notes. It's also, my social media is also on the right-hand side of my website. And let's see, I think that's it. So thanks again for listening this week, and stay tuned for next week, where I will continue to bring you real life solutions in what feels like an unfree world.